Mostar, a town of light and color. The Neretva has lavishly endowed it with its green beauty, and the faithful town gratefully embraces its banks on the journey through history and time. This wonderful town of the Turkish making came to be more than 5 centuries ago. The old bridge, a masterpiece of Turkish architecture, built by the famous architect Mimar Hayruddin in 1566, is a symbol of the town. Around this petrified crescent, as it was called by the enraptured poet, a town spread during centuries past along both banks of the skittish Neretva. Through permeation of cultures of various conquerors and masters, Mostar has assumed its today's appearance. A harmonious union of the East and the West, a town of irresistible charm and seducing Mediterranean beauty. Unfortunately, the Mostar you see in these pictures is no more. It will exist only in the memories and hearts of its people, and fortunately, in our TV pictures.
Mostar, grad svjetlosti i zavičaj boja. Neretva ga izdašno nagradila svojom svježom ljepotom, a on joj vjeran grli obale na putu kroz povijest i vrijeme. Ovaj prelijepi grad nastao je kao turska tvorevina prije više od 5 stoljeća. Stari most, remek dijelo turske arhitekture, nastao u radionici čuvenog graditelja Mimara Hayruddina pradavne 1566. godine, simbol je u imenu i znamenju ovog čudesnog grada. Uz ovaj okamenjeni polumjesec, kako su ga nazvale poete zatečene njegovom neponovljivom ljepotom, tokom minulih stoljeća širio se grad, podizan s ljubavlju i pažnjom njegovih žitelja duž obe obale plahovite Neretve i njene posestrime Radobolje, koju u svoj zagrljaj prima baš pod dno velike i najljepše svjetske kamene čuprije. Prožimanjem graditeljskih kultura raznih zavojevača i gospodara, koji su se smjenjivali kroz burnu povijest ovoga grada, Mostar je postao ovaj današnji, spretno i sretno ukomponirana cjelina istoka i zapada, grad neodoljivog šarma i zavodničke mediteranske ljepote. Nažalost, ovakav Mostar još postoji samo u sjećanjima i srcima njegovih građana i srećom na našim televizijskim snimcima.
Croatian propaganda echoing over the front line in Mostar, the most vicious theatre of war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Since May, Bosnian Croats, aided and abetted by the Croatian government, have been laying siege to about 60,000 people in East Mostar. Almost all of them are Muslims, and they're fighting back hard. There are no safe places in East Mostar. You can be killed or maimed at any time on any street corner. Until you see it happening, it's hard to realize how quickly lives can be destroyed. Franja Pavlović, who was born a Croat, made the mistake of going out to repair some shell damage on what had started out as a quiet morning. Because Raima, his wife, is a Muslim, the Croats expelled them over the front line into East Mostar in August. He had one chance. A fire engine, the only one left on this side of Mostar, was nearby. Perhaps it could get him to the hospital in time. Nothing in her life before the war had prepared Mrs. Pavlović for this. She's 53. After they married, she worked as an accountant in a graphic design business. The last traces of that life disappeared when her husband was hit. The streets were empty, and not just because of the shelling. There's a 6-hour-long daytime curfew. The idea is to stop people getting hurt. The hospital was only a few minutes away. Nothing is more than a few minutes away in East Mostar. The doctor hardly had to look at him. Mr. Pavlovich was dead. He'd been killed by shrapnel in the chest. For her sake, he went through the motions. You haven't examined him yet, she said. Please do more. Everything from the explosion to this had taken about 10 minutes. The hospital was ready for the next casualties.
This morning we were trying to repair our wall. It was destroyed by a mortar. He stepped out to find out what the time was and to get some water so that I could wash our clothes. That's when it happened.
The more the doctors see, the more it hurts. They said they tried not to let it show. They'd been married for 32 years. The river Neretva cuts Mostar in two. These wrecked buildings are on the east bank, the stronghold of the Muslim-led Bosnian government forces. But they have an important foothold on the otherwise Croat-controlled west bank as well. To get there, you have to cross the old bridge, which was built in the 1500s. It's been hit many times, but it's still standing, just about. The Croats on the hill know that if the bridge falls, they will have savaged morale on the other side. It would be a strategic victory as well, because it's the route to the front line. A local cameraman called Miralem Smalhodzic documented the Croats' attempts to destroy it. He took these pictures. He's dead now, killed by a mortar a month or so ago. They were bringing bodies back from the front the day that we first crossed. The stretcher bearers work for a well-organized civil defense network. Men who aren't in the army have to take part. East Mostar, because it's so isolated, has become the Bosnian government's best-run and most highly mobilized enclave. It has to be, because they have so little. They had to hope that the blankets would hide them from the snipers. You can't move very fast when you're carrying a stretcher. Normally they don't bother to bring the dead this far, but this man was alive when they started the journey, and they wanted to try to get him to the hospital. There didn't seem much point in turning back when he died. The soldiers told us that the best way across is to run. This is the least dangerous way over the river Neretva. A stroll across here used to be recommended in all the tourist guides. One other bridge still stands, but it's even closer to the Croat positions.
Croatian front line. First. 50 meters from us.
The soldiers' morale is surprisingly high, even though they're outgunned by the Croats. They use pieces of broken mirror to look at their enemies in the way that soldiers of another generation used periscopes in the trenches. War has its routine, standing guard, hanging around, often under fire. That was a rocket-propelled grenade hitting the floor above. Another exploded in the building opposite. As usual, the Bosnian army here is short of weapons, so they make their own. They call this one Little Thunder. The explosive, they said, came from unexploded Croat bombs.
What is it like now in Mostar to be a soldier?
We are all soldiers now here, and it's ordinary life.
It sounds like a tough life.
Yes, it's very tough life. It's very tough life.
So far, except for the tannoys relaying Croat propaganda, not all that different from any other urban front line in Bosnia-Herzegovina, even down to the bodies rotting in no man's land. But it is different because the Bosnian government soldiers here are learning. They're certain they've gained the edge over their Croat enemies on the other side of the line. Everything they've suffered since the war started has made one essential fact very clear. If they're going to survive, it's down to them. Nobody is going to come to the rescue.
The people here are surrounded by enemies, and long ago they stopped dreaming about international military intervention. But they think they can win this war because they have nowhere else to go, because their suffering has made them strong, and because they believe they have a simple choice: to fight or to die.
The first rule of movement in Mostar is to keep out of sight of the Croat gunners on Hum, the hill which dominates the city. The second is don't slow down, or the Croats on Hum will pick you off if their colleagues beyond the sandbags and down the street don't get you first. The Bosnian soldiers here know all about that and much more. If they didn't, they wouldn't have survived this long. This unit's commander is Nurman Berkan, a 31-year-old who was a veterinary surgeon before the war. He used to specialize in animal reproduction. Now, like his colleagues, he's learned how to kill. This homemade bomb, they complained, was too heavy to throw. They prefer the smaller ones.
I don't like it shooting anybody, but I must shooting, because enemies another side. I live here, my father, my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother dead here. I'm body, killing people, fight women and children. It's human rights. 200,000 people, Muslim die. When stop? When justice? Where is justice? Where? Who die, die. Who live, live.
The lesson the soldiers have drawn from the ethnic cleansing is that if you want to live, you have to fight. The refugees were led off into the heart of the enclave, where no civilian would disagree with the soldiers' conclusions. East Mostar has organized itself for a long war. In charge of that are Mostar's military leaders. In the chair, Esad Humo, an architect before the war. Like all East Mostar's commanders, he's found that he has a talent for fighting, leadership and survival. Nobody in the room said they wanted a Muslim state, but nobody denied they were fighting for Muslim rights.
2 years ago I was normal, if I can say normal citizen, working, learning. I have the job, wife, kids, brother, home. Now everything has changed.
Tell me, what are you guys here fighting for?
For what you are fighting? At first, for the place for living, for surviving. That's what we are fighting for. It's the first thing, and after that comes something else. I don't know what.
What comes after that? A Muslim state?
Muslim state, I'm not sure, because I'm not fighting for a Muslim state. I'm fighting for a state I can say the same as England or same as the French. I mean, state for the people who can live together without any difference.
Do the experiences you've had over 2 years affect the way that you fight?
We learn how to kill, yes. Not only the soldiers. People learn how to survive. Because here is a law of jungle. If you don't want to be killed, you should kill. That's normal jungle law. It's everybody knows about that.
Jungle law in conditions unfit for animals. All we have left, these women said, is sadness and pain. One gave us a letter to take out to a world they think has abandoned them. The civilians know that their only hope is to help themselves, to hang on until the killing ends, to survive the winter. But how do you avoid pneumonia, bronchitis, and worse when shells have smashed your roof? These people are refugees. They live in a ruin like thousands of others in East Mostar. She can't walk. She lies in stinking clothes on a soaking bed.
What can I do? Either I die or go on living like this.
Do you think your army will come to rescue you, to win this war for you?
Yes.
Why is that necessary? Isn't it better to talk?
I think it's necessary because there's no any use of talking with them, because they don't want to live with us.
But it'll take the Bosnian army to free you. It won't be the outside world or negotiations. It's your soldiers who'll do it.
Yes, because I want to tell you, we really don't trust anyone, because everybody talking about us, talking about hard situation, difficulty of life, but no one does anything.
Most people only go out when they have to, once a day to the soup kitchen. Each container full has to last a family 24 hours. There isn't much, but they all get about the same. The black market, which has corrupted Sarajevo, doesn't exist in East Mostar. Because hardly any aid gets into the city, there's nothing to buy or sell. It's all rationed. The civilians do as they're told. They have no choice. Organization begins at the front line. They've set up forward first aid stations. Nusreta Bercic, who used to be a geologist, is in charge of this one. She runs it from her own home. She was treating one of her neighbors when there was another explosion. It was very close, even closer than they thought. Two men had been walking down the street. A lot of people live in this area. It's only a few hundred yards from the Croat positions. She slapped the man who was most seriously wounded to try to stop him going into shock. Passers-by ran to help. Somebody shouted for some water. The man on the right died. They managed to save the other man. Not long afterwards, another emergency. A woman was lying on the riverbank. She'd been doing her family's washing. She was already dead, shot by a Croat sniper. If they survive long enough, the wounded are brought here to the hospital. It's another favorite Croat target. The stretchers are taken into the cellar of the building, which used to be a public health laboratory. The hospital director is Dr. Dragan Milovic. He set it up from nothing just before the war with the Bosnian Croat army, the HVO, started. Mostar's modern infirmary, where he used to work, is on the Croat side. This is a charnel house, but it's all they have. The corridor smells of blood. It isn't remotely sterile. There isn't enough space for the wounded. East Mostar is a small place. Often they treat people they know. Sometimes they treat people they love.
I ran out in the hall and I saw my father lying on the floor on stretchers. I looked at his face. One eye was open, one eye was closed, and he didn't have this side of his face. And I could see his teeth. And in that moment I thought, it's okay, it's only face, they can fix it, he'll have a scar, so what? He doesn't have to be beautiful. And I looked down and I uncovered him and I saw a huge hole here. He wasn't bleeding, it was just a red hole. And I tried to touch the shrapnel. You used to do it when you work in a hospital, then you touch to establish where the shrapnel is it deep inside or is... I started doing it and my hands were full of my father's blood.
We face huge problems, but we realize we have to solve them ourselves. We have to sort things out by ourselves. Whenever I talk to the Red Cross or Médecins Sans Frontières or any other international organization, they tell me, we would help you, but our actions are limited by the Croat HVO forces besieging the city. They always mention the HVO. They use them as an excuse for their own limitations.
The result is that Emir Demic is watching his 12-year-old brother Armel die. He's with him all the time. Armel has been in a coma since he was hit in the head by shrapnel. Sometimes he looks a little better, almost as if he could be coming round. Like promises of medical evacuation, it's a cruel deception.
He's got no real chance here, and the doctors are saying that every moment is precious. Has anybody said that he might get evacuated? Some promises have been made, but they're empty promises.
A large number of patients have died because we don't have the facilities to treat them properly. Under these conditions, I don't think the kid stands a chance.
It never stops. "11-year-old Medina has just been wounded in the head. A shell hit her family's flat. The hospital didn't have a bed for her, so they left her on a stretcher. Her father wasn't much bothered by his own shrapnel injuries, which were serious enough. All he could think about was his daughter. They were preparing her for an operation. 7 months ago, the theatre was an empty storeroom. They have a brain surgeon at the hospital who didn't want to be filmed because his wife and child are on the other side. But the only diagnostic aid he has is an old X-ray machine, so he can't do much. Dr. Milovic, the hospital director, is also the anesthetist. He sedated Medina and they started work. International donors have promised him a modern field hospital much better than the primitive conditions here that they all loathe. But the hospital is stuck in Croatia. Nobody seems capable of getting it to East Mostar. They didn't try to take the shrapnel out of Medina's brain. It was too risky. Her only chance was evacuation to a proper hospital, a long way from the war. There was an explosion. A shell had landed just outside the hospital. A doctor who'd gone to the top of the stairs leading down to the cellar had been wounded. It's dangerous to stand there, but they do, to get away from the fetid atmosphere downstairs. Give me some space, Dr. Milovic said. He'd rushed out of the operating theatre to examine his colleague. The wife of a hospital worker who was slightly wounded was helped down. The injured doctor was scared. Bad leg wounds often end in amputations in this hospital. Dr. Milovic tried to reassure him. He'd been lucky by the standards of this place. The doctors are at breaking point. It's not unusual for one man to perform 10 major operations in a day. A few yards away, the operation on Medina was still going on. They had time to do the best they could for her. No other casualties had come in. It gets no better at night. 500 Muslims had just been robbed and thrown out of their homes in West Mostar by the Croats. They had to cross the river Neretva to get to comparative safety on a bridge made of rope and planks. Bosnian soldiers told them which way to go. The Croats were shooting at the people they'd just made refugees. Only a few hours before, until the Croat gangs had come for them and forced them over the front line, they thought they were safe. They'd been settling down for the night. The Croat machine guns didn't let up, and the refugees kept on coming. They were trying to kill old men and women, mothers, and their children. She was so frightened she could barely walk, but she tried to calm her sons. Each new family has to be fed and housed. This is a war crime with a cold purpose, to increase the pressure on the military authorities in East Mostar. The brutality of the expulsions drives home the message that compromise with Croat extremists is neither possible nor desirable. The refugees spent their first night in East Mostar in a bombed-out theatre. In one evening, all of them had lost their homes and possessions. They talked of persecution, rape, and murder.
We were driven to a small wood. My sons were pulled out of the car. They were taken into that wood. I was told that their throats were slit. I only live because I have to. Only because I have to. What sort of life is this?
What do I know about politics? I've never thought about it. Tonight the Croat soldiers told me to shut up, to be quiet. That's what I did. I've never done anything to anyone.
smo napravili ovaj novi most, on se zove Inat most. I uradili smo ga u vrijeme granadiranja grada
Und wir
Mostara.
haben diesen Bus gebaut zur Zeit, als Mostar
Ja, kad bi ga vidjeli ovdje
Pozdravljam vašu spremnost da učestvujete u izgradnji starog dijela grada. Posebno vašu spremnost da učestvujete u izgradnji starog mosta.
starog mosta izazvalo širom svijeta veliki interes i želje institucija, organizacija i pojedinaca da pomognu i daju doprinos u njegovoj rekonstrukciji, smatrali smo da će se osnivanjem ove fondacije usmjeriti sredstva na jednom mjestu i to u gradu Mostaru.
I meni je velika čast da sam učinio to zadovoljstvo da budem predsjednik ovako značajne plemenite fondacije.
It is also my great pleasure and my privilege that you have made me the president of such a significant and very important foundation.
To će biti mene najdraža funkcija u životu.
This is going to be my dearest function in my life.
Meni se uvijek činilo da je stari most sakupio svu Bosnu i Hercegovinu u sebi, da su u njemu sapete sve silnice spajanja i razdvajanja, činio mi se da je neko živo biće koje strpljivo premošćava i spaja njemu.
Cette journée du 29 septembre 1997 marque une étape importante du processus de reconstruction en Bosnie et Herzégovine. La sortie de la première pierre du Stari Most constitue en effet pour moi et pour toute la division multinationale Sud-Est un signe tangible de notre participation à la reconstruction d'un pays déchiré il y a peu par la guerre.
Ovo nije samo praznik Mostara, niti samo Bosne i Hercegovine. Ovo je veliki trenutak za sve ljude kojima je civilizacija na srcu.
maksimalnu potporu ponovnoj revitalizaciji, u stvari izgradnji staroga mosta, koji će biti u interesu pomirenja svih građana grada Mostara, interesu pomirenja svih na prostorima Bosne i Hercegovine i koji će biti sigurno u interesu svijeta kao znak mira.
Mi smo zato 4 godine tražili i uporno se borili da njegova obnova dobije prije svega zajednički, a onda i ovaj internacionalni karakter. Građani ovog grada, i Hrvati i Srbi i Bošnjaci, ponosni su na ovaj trenutak i žele zajedno sa vama preko obnovljenog luka Starog mosta preći u 21. vijek. Koristim priliku da se još jednom zahvalim Svjetskoj banci koja se brinula i prepoznala važnost ovog projekta, kao i UNESCO-u i njegovim predstavnicima koji su davali podršku našim naporima da budućim naraštajima vratimo ovaj dragulj nad Neretvom. Ja moram lično izraziti jedno veliko olakšanje što smo dočekali jedan ovakav dan, jer to je bila moja velika želja da se napravi partnerstvo između grada Mostara, UNESCO i Svjetske banke na ovom projektu. I veoma smo sretni i počašćeni vašim dolaskom u Mostar. Zahvaljujem se svim ambasadorima i predstavnicima mnogih zemalja u Bosni i Hercegovini, predstavnicima Europske unije koji su mnogo pomogli ovome gradu, ambasadi Sjedinjenih Američkih Država koja je pomogla mnogo da realiziramo sve ove prepreke, a posebno predstavnicima Turske i predsjedniku Demirelu koji je svojim prvom donacijom prije 3 godine pokrenuo čitav ovaj projekat.
Upravo smo sa ljudima koji obnavljaju stari most razgovarali o tome kako konkretno pomoći. Nastavit ćemo o tome razgovarati jer želimo pomoći.
Ne mogu da vjerujem da poslije 10 godina da smo ipak uspjeli došli do ovoga trenutka. Mislim od one Oručevićeve ideje da se napravi, da bude svjetski projekat, on je stvarno postao svjetski projekat.
Ja moram izraziti posebno zadovoljstvo što se konačno ideja koju smo prije dugo godina osmislili i postavili kao cilj u Mostaru realizira.
Bekle! Haydi buraya da. Şefim. Tabii. Bekle. Yok bir gitsin. Hiç kimse kalmasın.